All right, welcome everybody to according to Andrew number 10, labor-backed currency. So this is kind of interesting topic. So we'll start with some background, and then we'll get into some ways that we could potentially have a labor-backed currency. And I'll go through the differentiation between what we currently have and what ideally I would like to have. Because currently we have a debt-based currency. So actually, let's start there. That's a good spot to start. So there's two ways in which you can kind of have a currency. Uh, you can have a currency on the promise to do labor and have that labor be more productive tomorrow than it is possible to have it today. So that's basically the usury um, lie. Not necessarily. Well, it's, uh, or you can have money based on the productive capacity that you've already done, which is actually the basis of wealth, right? Um, it's the difference between promising someone you'll build them a house versus having an actual house. You know, one has actual intrinsic value, one does not. Uh, if that person decides to pull off that thing in the future, it has the potential to have intrinsic value, but in the moment, it does not have any intrinsic value. Uh, so how do we get here, kind of thing? So let's start with where most people kind of start, and that's the barter system. So the barter system uh, is basically a representation of how a uh, labor-backed monetary system would work without a medium of exchange. So as people make stuff in the barter system and they exchange things back and forth, they they generate more and more wealth as they're doing this, right? You know, your chicken lays an egg every day, and so you have an egg's more worth of wealth. You uh, sew a new sweatshirt every day, and so there's a sweatshirt's worth more of wealth in your economic system every day that can be used to barter with. So money comes in, and it allows you to fractionalize these items, right? Because um, it makes it hard. It's hard to line up exactly things one to one, right? How much is a sweat? How many eggs is a sweatshirt worth? How many um, uh, sticks of butter is versus eggs are you willing to trade? Do you even want butter to trade? Uh, does the person that's producing sweatshirts even want butter, and vice versa? Uh, so that makes it hard. So you have this one standard thing in which everybody agrees to exchange um, for, and that allows you to uh, fractionalize and buy specific items that you want. And this is good because it allows for more economic growth because it allows for greater niche industries to develop. Uh, maybe there's only a handful of people that want to listen to this podcast, for instance, and uh, you know, if they're um, if I'm producing something that's so niche and like they only and the people that find it interesting are um, some sweatshirt makers and stuff like that, and they're willing to pay me in sweatshirts, but no one else is willing to take. Uh, well, then I would have to take those sweatshirts and then find like I wouldn't have food then, right? So then I'd have to do something to get food. So things like that. It really facilitates that. But the thing that um, is kind of interesting is, and we talked about this 2 or 3 streams ago, is this increases the amount of money in the system because money is commodities are money in a barter system, right? But this is not how our current monetary system works. Like we don't necessarily print more money when we produce more things. Uh, because we have inflation, it's kind of the other way. We print stuff with the expectation that we'll produce stuff tomorrow, which causes its own issues. But we'll put that to the side for a second. Um, so in a barter system, as you produce more things, you're effectively printing more money. That is never. I don't want to say never. It that kind of system where you have your monetary, when you abstract that to a monetary medium of exchange level, it is, I've never seen nor heard of any situation in which that monetary medium expands accordingly with the increased productive capacity. And if it does do that, it's only by pure happenstance because of debt printing and the promise to produce more things tomorrow than we produce today. Uh, which then it will inevitably lead to contraction, economic contraction. Because eventually you aren't going to produce as much tomorrow as you do today. So how does debt flip this on its head? I kind of just said it. The idea that uh, tomorrow is always going to be a good day, that the crops are never going to fail, that there's never going to be something that disrupts and lowers your productive output is something that only economists can come up with. There is like a funny quote somewhere where it's um, only people that believe in like fairy tales and economists believe something can go on forever, something like that. Uh, that's not the exact quote, but it'd be interesting to see if this is possible. Now, the big giant question is how. And I'm not gonna lie, that's a really hard question to answer, and I don't necessarily have an answer for it. Um, but I will try to potentially give some ideas. And the main reason I kind of wanted to make this is so that uh, to get the idea out there more, and so that people can kind of run with it. That maybe have different perspectives or have researched this in different areas, and hopefully get um, people talking about this idea and get better ideas about it on kind of the books. Kind of start um, polling uh, polling the masses and kind of using collective ideas to generate a way of doing this. So, how do we create money and bind it to productive increases when our money is inherently um, abstract? It's a medium of exchange and a store of value. That's its job. So historically, gold and silver have been used for this purpose, and they do work, but they have a limiting principle. Now, people that argue for gold and silver argue this limiting principle is good, and there's certainly some logic to that. The limiting principle being uh, if a country wanted to print a whole bunch of more money, more than was actually fit the productive output of the country, they couldn't do that. because you have to find more gold, you have to dig it out of the earth, you have to do things like that. And their argument is that if you are more productive and therefore you are trading, if you're more productive, you should have more foreign trade and you should have trade surpluses with other countries. Therefore, you should have gold inflowing into your country, and that therefore makes it so that the overall um, money money supply inflates with the productive capacity of your country. And this does work with to an extent. So the problem is that means that on a global level, um, the whole money supply has to work, or not work, but um, if there if there's a lack of gold in the overall economic system of trade between nations, this there won't be the money that to influx even with an increased productive capacity, and therefore it's going to limit the amount of productive capacity not of your own nation but also of the entire world, because people won't have the money to buy the products, kind of thing. Some economists, mainly your libertarian type economists, probably would just say, uh, you know, prices would just adjust to fit that. Sure, that is a way to take care of it, but um, if you have chronic deflation like that, and it's things are always deflating, at a certain point you kind of hit like hyper deflation is what I kind of call it, where nobody wants to produce anything because uh, they nobody wants to sell anything because uh, it's their or no, it's nobody wants to buy anything because their money will be worth more tomorrow than it is today. My bad. It's the opposite of inflation. Uh, wouldn't miners and explorers be incentivized to produce more? Yes, they would. But if you hit a problem like they had in the Middle Ages, where technology, basically your money supply was bottlenecked by your technological expanse in that field specifically. So there, the Europe didn't have. This is coming from E. Michael Jones's Barren Metal book. Europe didn't have enough uh, gold and silver to meet the economic increased productivity when you got to the Middle Ages and early modern period as production was picking up. And to meet that, they had to increase the productive capacity of the gold and silver mines that they had there, and then they found the New World, in, and those gold and silver mines finally did fix uh, that problem. But productive capacity was handicapped until that point, and you couldn't all the productive capacity or the growth of the economy hinged on a economic breakthrough in one very specific field instead of being able to have economic growth happen organically through, like, if you just didn't have the minds or like the people that could figure out how to crack this problem, um you weren't going to have an increased economic productivity. And then on top of that, maybe those it's one of those arguments against the defense state that we currently have is we spend, like, most engineers, not most, I think 30% of all engineering brain power is spent on the military industrial complex. I have several friends that work for military contractors and family friends as well, and they're all engineers. And um, I'm not saying anything against that, but like it's there that mental productive capacity is going towards that specific thing, and if that specific, mainly because that specific thing pays better and is a very secure job. But maybe if that wasn't available, there would be another thing that they would slot into in a private business type sense where they would be better at it. So, like, let's say somebody did uh, took their mental capacity throughout their entire life and they used it to be able to make the breakthrough to increase the productivity of mining. But if that restriction hadn't been there, they could have maybe used their engineering capacities to increase the productivity of uh, wool production, let's say. And they just were much more apt and suited to slot into doing that kind of thing. And you could have seen a greater increase had they filled their natural niche more. Now, the economy's never gonna work perfectly like that in any situation, no matter what. But it's uh, it's a theory. Um, so where was I? So yeah, so money. You can basically you can have not enough money in the system. Uh, I Michael Jones uses a great example in his bare metal book of when you add a new player to a game of Monopoly, you give them starting money. You deal them more money. That adds more money into the economy of the game. Uh, and so with our current systems, none of that's kind of well. With our current system, it's kind of taken into account because of the debt system that inflates the amount of currency, but it's not a good way to do it. But if you remove the debt system, there's no system in place to increase the money supply, and therefore you're going to have this weird deflationary effect um, constantly, because there would be like a set amount of money, and you're going to have generally throughout history we've seen an increase in the amount of people. So, well, not always, but the last 200-ish years, there have been an increase in the amount of people pretty exponentially. Uh, and so, if you don't add more uh, money into the system to account for the extra people and the extra potential capacity of production, um, then you're going to have issues. Uh, so yeah. So ways in which we can potentially create money in this system. So I don't have a ton of great ideas, but one is you could base it on the GDP. So basically, this adds new questions into the equation, but I'll say it and then we'll deal with the new questions it adds in. So one of the new questions it adds into the system is uh, you ah, okay. So if you're printing money based on the GDP, the government's the one that's printing that money. Where does that money go to? Right? Because now the money. All right. So we've had an increase in productive capacity. Great. We just printed a bunch of money. That money should go to the people that increase that productive capacity. But how do you determine where those people are? What that stuff is worth? Like, so the the way you could kind of handle it is you would get rid of taxes. So that sounds like a bonus right there. And what would happen is as the government increased its productive capacity, or as the nation increased its productive capacity, the government would just print that increased productive capacity uh, in currency for the year, and that's how much money the government gets to spend that year. And then they spend it, and then it gets filtered into the economy through there. Now, there you get a bunch of winners and losers, right? Like defense contractors are going to make a killing. Um, and also you have to trust the government to be fair. The GDP or GNP has to be accurate. It can't be manipulated. These are a lot of things that are probably not going to happen. Uh, but I mean, I don't know. Like the idea of a non-debt backed currency, considering our current economic system, seems super far fetched and requires people of really high moral compass. So the idea that this would work, I mean, it also requires people with high moral compass. So maybe work for a generation. Um, but yeah. So then the next idea comes from a populist back in the 1920s called, what is his name? Uh, McCune. And his plan was, this is also from Bare Metal. It's from the Populist Rebellion, page 1150. So after the failure of the Texas Exchange, McAnew came up with an idea of how to reform the American monetary system that came to be known as the Sub-Treasury Plan. According to the plan outlined in the pages of the National Economist, the journal McAnew edited in the Washington, D.C., United States, the United States government would create a series of cooperatives which would issue greenbacks directly to the economy based on what farmers produced. McAnew's plan called for federal warehouses to be erected in every county in the nation that annually yielded over $500,000 worth of agricultural product. In these sub-treasuries, farmers could store their crops to await higher prices before selling. They were permitted to borrow up to 80% of the local market price upon storage, and could sell their sub-treasury certificates of deposit at the prevailing market price the time at any time of year. Farmers were to pay interest at 2% annuum, plus small charges for grading, storage, and insurance. Wheat, corn, oats, barley, rye, rice, tobacco, cotton, wool, and sugar were included under the marketing program. According to McAnew's plan, the farmer would be paid in legal tender directly by the government. With this one bold stroke, McAnew eliminated the banks as the creators of the nation's money supply. He also eliminated usury from the system. Instead of money as debt created by banks, the government created money directly based on real production and tangible goods in storage. In theory, when farmers repaid their loans, the currency would be paid back into the treasury and extinguished, withdrawn from circulating money supply, which the Federal Reserve creates and destroys money through the medium of bank reserves and bank lending. So that's the other idea. I'm not gonna lie, I don't necessarily fully understand how this works to a certain extent. But those are kind of some ideas for how this could be done. Uh, so hopefully, you know, if I if this gets out there to enough people, kind of thing, uh, it will at least pique enough people's interest that they'll start thinking about this idea, and because I think it's an interesting problem that would be cool for economics and economists to try to tackle. So uh, that's kind of all I have to say on this topic. If there's any other questions, Bishop Bear, if you're still in the chat and have any other questions, let me know. I'll give you guys a minute. All right. Well, if there's no other questions, then I this has been According to Andrew, and I have been Andrew. Hopefully you found this insightful, and uh, if you did, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment, and share this video. I would greatly appreciate it, especially this one. The other ones, I'm talking about other stuff, but I think this needs to be more in the public consciousness of ideas that we could potentially push forward, and I would like to see this idea debated more. So I'd really appreciate it if people got it out there. But anyway, thank you guys for listening, and have a good day.